So we're talking about translating monster abilities into PC abilities. So for instance, with the Pixie, here we run into the thing that I think comes up a lot, that, you know, the monsters, you have to look at them differently than player characters in the meta thought process, because you can say for a Pixie, oh yeah, they're invisible all the time, because you don't have to deal with a Pixie all the time. The Pixie is going to come in for an encounter, a wandering monster, part of a room, whatever happens, and then it leaves the scene. As the GM, we don't worry about, now that invisible Pixie's off doing its thing, we're not concerned with how it affects the rest of the universe. It just flies off back into the ether until summoned again on some kind of other check or something like that, right? We don't have to deal with it. With a player character, we have to deal with it. And even though Old School does not have the same sort of balance that, say, 5th edition does, there are balancing mechanisms. Things like, yeah, your amount of experience points per level being a big one. But then we can also have, when do these abilities unlock? You know, there aren't that many player character classes. So in terms of what we see for monster or non-human player character classes, is everything just unlocks at first level. Elves get all their elfy stuff first level. Dwarves, halflings, same thing. And so we just bump up their experience point requirements accordingly to account for that. But their powers, their abilities are fairly low level. They're fairly well grounded. What do you do now when you have something like a Pixie that has a really powerful innate ability? It's not even in terms of how it's presented as like casting a spell. It is literally, I can just become invisible at will, and oh, by the way, this is the kind of visibility that doesn't even turn off if I attack or do some mischief. It doesn't turn off. Like, it literally only turns off if I ask if I want to turn it off, and then I can flip it right back on. Super powerful. So how do you translate that to a player character which you're dealing with all the time? And do you want a first level character who can just be invisibility all the time, regardless of any kind of circumstances, just working? That's hard, especially compared to the other player characters that don't get anything nearly that strong. The other thing is, it's not even something like it's strong, say, in a cleric with turn undead, which is strong, but it's very situational. You have to be facing undead, then you can use that. If something's not undead, turn undead is useless. If you're in the woods, then an elf finds secret doors, not really applicable, right? So all these things are kind of situational, whereas the Pixie's ability is both high level. If you look at the spells that would take to match up what this Pixie can do, it's high level, and it's universal. There is no circumstance in which being able to turn invisible at will and stay invisible regardless of what you do isn't going to be really effective and strong. So how do you deal with that? So it seems like Perkins' idea is to have some kind of roll against a statistic. Perkins, you can correct me if I'm misunderstanding. Maybe you have some kind of check. Roll under your wisdom to go invisible. Do something like that. This is lukewarm coffee for the working man, which could be one way to do it. The one thing I want to be careful with, I mentioned this during the stream, is I really want the player to feel like they're the creature. That they're not some ersatz version, that they're not some dumbed down, minimized version, which I think what happens with 5th edition when they've done this, because everything has to be locked into everything you get with your creature. If you're a creature a creature other than human, right? It's kind of like a level 0 thing. And you can't, they've determined, hey, no negative modifiers. So you can't balance in terms of, hey, you're getting this much to strength, so you can take away this much from something else. Nope, you're not doing that. But it can't be super strong to counteract, to really be representative of what you're doing. So I can't imagine, I don't know if there's a Pixie species in 5th edition that you could play as, but I imagine they're not getting anything like invisibility. Maybe they might get some little invisibility once per day. I don't know. They're not getting it. So you're, as a player, if I'm playing a Pixie in say that kind of game, I don't really feel like I'm playing a Pixie, because I look at the Pixies who are monsters and they're really different than I am. So I don't want any mechanic I put in. I still want the players. It has to be, to me anyway, it has to be as close as I can get to giving them the monster experience at some stage. Now, part of the thing about creating these level templates, these creature as class type of level progressions, is that it doesn't have to be at level 1. You don't have to be a full-fledged Pixie with everything a Pixie can do at level 1, but at some stage you get there. So you keep along with doing a Pixie, and I think I had it at, by the time you did 10 levels, At level 10, you were essentially a full-fledged Pixie, same thing as you are in the monster manual, but you're level 10 now. And then you could probably look at it and think, okay, level 10, what does that compare to, say, what a wizard can do, or what a fighter can do, whatever. They're taking into account maybe kind of items and other things, right? So that's why I want to balance it. So I don't want to make something that, or I want to hew closest to that, as close as I get to that. There might be some that come out of the woodwork, and you're like, if I give the player this, I don't know what to do. So either I have to wait until a certain level to give it to them, or maybe I have to tone it down or change it up, do something, right? So that's kind of where I fall. So I don't know. Rolling under stat, I think, works. It might lead to more min-maxy kind of behavior where it's like, well, I'm going to get an 18 in strength so that I barely ever, or, whatever stat is, so I'm going to rolling under, which is it's fine. That's how you're setting up. I mean, if you're going to set up a system in which your innate abilities are triggered off of your attribute rolls, then you're inviting the player to maximize their chances by doing that. That still, there's, say if they have 18 and you're rolling a d20, that still gives them 10% chance of failing, which is something. It's just, it's different. But I do want, at some stage, the player to feel like I did it. I am now a full-fledged Pixie, or Dragon, or Balrog, or Giant Toad. Like, I am, me and the monster, we are one, kind of thing. So that's kind of where I lean when I'm going through. That's maybe my driving thought process of, at some point when they've gone through so many levels, they are exactly where they would be if they were the monster. But, that's me. It doesn't have to be everybody's. Windows, why do you have to pop stuff up on me? Perkins says, you might introduce other limitations, like if they're touching iron or steel, they can't go invisible. Also mentions that my level-based limitations would work too, possibly following spell progression. Yeah, you could do that for some stuff. The big decisions you have is, when did they get this ability, and how does it scale? So the way my thing was last night, when I was doing it, and I guess I have it here still, we can look at it. Since we're talking about it, might as well look at it. I just happen to keep it here. So here's my level progression that I gave them. So I gave them the invisibility from jump, because my presumption was that this is a main characteristic of Pixies. As I noted afterwards, this might not actually be what people think of with Pixies. So I would be fine to go in and mess around with this stuff. If I was reading up and maybe the player who comes to me and says, I want a Pixie character, and I say, okay, what does a Pixie kind of mean to you? What's the mythological background? What is your source for Pixieage? And I go, when I read it, it doesn't have anything to do with invisibility, I'll can it, right? You're a different sort of Pixie, different thing. But the things I thought were like, these are kind of your Pixie main things, is you get flying, some kind of invisibility, and then a low armor class, because remember, in BX, you don't have different size groupings that have different mechanical interactions with each other. So there's no sense of I'm tiny versus medium, so do something else. I tend to house rule those in because I think they're very useful, but out of the box, we don't have it. So just dealing with out of the box, I said, okay, you're going to get that low AC, which is crazy. I mean, that's like you have almost full plate on and you're not wearing anything. But I would also say, I think I said something, can't wear armor. You could probably add in something like, can't use iron or steel. That would be totally fine, and it works with a lot of fairy lore, elf lore, so that works great. So I get lesser invisibility. So you can be invisible, but it's just your normal visibility, where you're invisible, but you do something, it bops you out. And you could fly, but you have to fly. The way they actually have Pixie flight in the monster description is you can fly for 3 rounds and then rest. You have to rest 1 round. So I flip it around for at low levels. You can fly 1 round, then you got to rest 3 rounds. Then, hey, you gain surprise. Instead of just auto surprise, you gain surprise on a 1 and 2. And then all these things, your flight amps up, your invisibility amps up, and everything kind of amps up until by 10th level you have everything. But I could change this around. I could start with, maybe I say AC 6, and then I go down that way, because you're just getting better. Because part of this, I think, with this AC thing is you're nimble, you're small, you're zipping around, but maybe I could say, when you're inexperienced, you're sluggish still. You're not that great. So while you're still harder to hit because you're tiny, that's going to scale. So I could scale these things out. This is still, even if it was only what you get at level 1, this would be pretty darn strong. But you're a Pixie. I want you to feel you're a Pixie, right? I could spend hours and just reorganizing these things, moving numbers up and down, and there probably wouldn't be one that I might feel. You'd probably have to put me on some kind of timer. I could probably sit there and do it forever. leave and then come back and then spend another few hours dithering around on it. I think the big things are, okay, figure out what you like, and then actual experience levels, because I think that's where you're going to get a lot of experimentation, actual in-game stuff. Like, here's where I think you're going to fall, see where you start to line up with the players, where they are, and then fiddle with it to get to the right spot where you want to be. But I can tell you this, the experience levels for the Pixie are going to be quite high. Because you're getting, even with lesser invisibility, it's at will. Maybe you could have something like, I don't know, you could probably put some timer on it maybe at this point, but you're casting this one spell at will pretty much all the time. So you're going to have it's going to be a high experience point value. And then we didn't even get to look at other monster classes where you might say, and there's something that's like a 30 hit die monster, which means that your level progression is going to be at least 30 levels. Everyone else is done on their 5th character. You're still trugging along, but at the end of the day, you're going to be a dragon, a Balrog, whatever else. Perka says the strength of a Pixie may be quite low. Yeah, you can have that. I minded their constitution being kind of low. You can play around with the attribute modifiers. I don't know that you're going to get them to a degree to really offset the level progression stuff, at least my version. You're still going to have a pretty strong first level character, even if I were to say strength -4, constitution -4. The fact that you are invisible, have a really low AC, when you're going to have the lowest AC in the party for probably, unless someone gets, they roll really well on their coinage and they can afford full plate off the bat. You're going to have the lowest AC in the party, probably for at least a level or two. And then only the fighters, if you have one, or a fighter type, is going to get to your level. So, there's a lot of advantages. Perka says 1d6 for strength. That'd be another thing to do, is take away dice. I wouldn't mind that. Like, hey, roll 4d6, you guys roll 3d6, you guys roll 2d6. I think some game, I don't know if it was Ardent Grimoire, maybe Ardent Grimoire had that. Somewhere else I saw that, where they actually just changed the amount of dice you roll. Though I'd say it's out of fashion. Certainly in the modern game and in 5th edition, it's out of fashion to have kind of negative modifiers. That's where, again, I would love to have just tiny, small, medium, because then you could really just set it that, hey, if you're tiny, even if you have 18 strength, if you're dealing with something that's medium-sized or larger than that, like, your strength is just getting, like, it's like adding a big negative modifier, whereas if you're huge and you have a 6 strength, it's all relative. Basically, that your strength would be relative to your creature size, and then you wouldn't have to worry about all this minus this plus this. It's like, no, you're fine. And then if you're medium and you're fighting something tiny and you hit it, it's like you're doing extra damage, because you're just, even if you're not strong for a medium-sized person, you're fighting a tiny thing. You don't have to be strong to squish an ant. It's just, my daughter can do it. Squished. A baby can do it by accident. Squished, even though, baby's got, 2 strength.